Hello, Clement29 here with another review for Rush Hour, the TV series. This time, it's episode 10. Sorry I'm a little late on this. I'm still trying to get used to it airing on Saturdays and not Thursdays because I'm waiting till Thursday to watch the episode, and then I'm sitting there like, oh, it was on Saturday. But, I should be on top of it from now on. I should remember. Anyway, let me get on to this episode. So, the plot of this is weird. Okay, this episode is simultaneously the most un-Rush Hour episode that this show has had thus far, and in some ways, the most Rush Hour. I'll get to this in a little bit, when I actually, get to the parts. The plot is actually really interesting. It's actually more horror-inspired, involving a serial killer, and it is actually really interesting. I thought the plot of this was handled really well. It really was. I'm not going to spoil it because this is definitely a plot-heavy episode. It has a lot more plot than it does fighting. It actually only has a couple fight scenes, but I'll get to those in a little bit when I talk about the action. This is actually really interesting because this is the first time that we're actually getting anything on the captain's career back when she was, a detective. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but that's something that actually really was interesting to me. I'm like, we finally get something on her character. Now, the captain in the Rush Hour movies he was there for like a couple scenes in any movie. He's only a couple scenes in Rush Hour 1, a deleted scene in Rush Hour 2, and then one scene in Rush Hour 3. But this captain, has been in a lot of it. I've been in a lot of the episodes. I think all of them thus far. But we never really got much development on her. And this is actually part of the plot, in that we actually find out that this is related to a case that she did years ago, back when she was a detective, before she became captain. So I was actually really happy to see that being part of the plot. Overall, the plot is... Man, I can't talk about this really without spoiling it, and I actually really want to avoid spoilers with this, because going in not knowing what's going on in the episode makes it so much more enjoyable. You actually have a mystery going on, and it's very much a well-constructed episode in terms of the plot. So that's really all I can say on that without spoiling it, but needless to say, if you like a good, well-handled mystery, especially when it comes to finding the culprit of serial killings, this episode is really good. Now, for the humor, it's, again, Gerald comes in with most of the humor. In fact, this is one thing I like. The episode starts off with Gerald, Lee, and Carter on one of those tour buses, with the open top, and, a guy at the front, saying, and on your left, you'll see this building, which is very famous, and stuff like that. Which I immediately thought, oh, this reminds me of when, of that tour bus that Carter chased Leon to in the first movie. Now, there wasn't any references towards that, but I don't know if that was maybe just a sort of subtle reference. But if it wasn't, I actually think it was, and if it is, it's a nice little mythology gag. But the joke is that Gerald is this history buff, and I always like it when they give the goofy characters these like weirdly intelligent quirks. And then Gerald knows all these landmarks across the city, and this guy who's doing the tour is incompetent, so whenever he tries to say something, Gerald just comes up and he's just like, this building was made in 1928, and rattles on about the history and stuff, and honestly, it's hilarious. Again, Paige Kennedy is freaking hilarious. Gerald I don't know if this is because of the material, or if this is just because the actor himself is hilarious, but Gerald continues to be one of the funniest parts of this entire show. The rest of the episode it's not humorless, but it doesn't feel like it has as much humor going on in it as other episodes of the show do. There's really no memorable jokes aside from the whole thing with Gerald doing the tour guide stuff. Oh, and Gerald does come in there, and he especially he especially wants to help when it comes to when the fact that their case leads to an old building that's been there for like 100 years, and he's like, "Don't worry, I know all the stuff I can help you with." Yeah, there are a couple jokes in and out of it. Some stuff dropped from Carter, especially cracking jokes about this one guy's hipster beard. But really, this episode does, like I said, focus on plot more than it does the other elements. So, but that's not to say it doesn't have any jokes, because it does. It's just not as prevalent. It definitely takes itself a little more seriously at times. Another thing is that that's humor. I didn't find it as good, but there's a new character that's introduced. I'll talk about her more in a bit. She's the forensic expert, and she is loopy. Cute, but loopy. And that's pretty much what her character is. Now, another thing is there's this running gag throughout the series that Lee is this, like, unknowing chick magnet. And Carter, despite the fact that he flirts with every woman, no woman wants to be around him for more than 5 seconds. And it's hilarious. It's actually... I don't want to say that this was done in the movies, because that kind of thing wasn't really focused on. I mean, Lee did hook up with Isabella, who's beautiful, but really that wasn't, made much of a notice in the movies. But in the show, I actually like this. And this continues with this forensic expert. It's obviously, she looks at Lee and she's just like, hard eyes. And then Carter's just... So he's pissed off because he's like, how do you have all these women falling at your feet and I don't have any women looking at me? I think he's had one girl who's actually probably returned his affections. And that's funny. I find that funny. I find it funny that Dee Dee really likes him. This forensics expert likes him. The captain obviously has this, wow, you are hot thing going on. And, and Lee's just completely oblivious to it. He's just like, okay. And he's like... Oh, there's also another joke about this, about Dee Dee calling Carter and Lee besties, and Lee's trying to understand English lingo. And that was funny. But overall, this episode isn't nearly as humor-centric as other episodes. Not that that's a bad thing, but moving on. The action, I did quite like the action in this. Fortunately, we get the return of slow motion. But the silver lining in this is that they don't completely overuse it. Now, I would prefer no slow motion at all. The movies didn't use slow motion, the movies didn't need slow motion, and honestly, this show doesn't need slow motion. A good structured and well choreographed fight scene doesn't need any enhancements, and over editing just makes them look lame. But the slow motion in this episode does actually enhance a few shots, so I'll give them credit for that. They've toned down the use of slow motion and they're putting it more thoughtfully in. So I would much rather have that than slow motion every 5 seconds for every single move that just makes things look awkward. Now, funnily enough, this is what I was talking about at the rush hour. This has 2 scenes in it. I won't go into great detail for plot-related reasons, but 2 fight scenes that I actually really liked. One of them takes place in the kitchen fighting a bunch of chefs, and honestly, don't ask for context, just watch the episode. And Lee goes up against a chef wielding this knife, and he gets a pan and he's fighting him with the pan. And then Carter actually gets the most Jackie Chan fight scene, because he's like running all over the kitchen trying to fight, and it does remind me strongly of Carter, very kind of Rush Hour 2 Carter, with a little bit mixed up of Rush Hour 3. He's actually pretty darn efficient in this fight, and he does he's grabbing doors and throwing them open, he's like rolling over tables, and I was watching this episode and I was thinking, man, they should have Lee be doing that stuff, because that's so Jackie Chan-esque. Though I'm just glad that there's this kind of goofy stuff anyway. And I mean, we saw from Carter's big fight against Kenji's men in Rush Hour 3 that, Carter can still pull off some of that goofy stuff too. And a lot of it did remind me of stuff from Rush Hour 2 anyway. Especially, I think one guy grabs him and is choking him and he's pulling him like onto a table. And, and he needed Lee to help him, but Lee was too busy, fighting a crazy chef with a knife. But I really did enjoy that fight scene. The other fight scene I enjoy is a one-on-one fight with Lee and this other guy. And for the first time in the show, Lee struggles strongly with a fight, and I was waiting for this. I've been waiting for this so much, because in the movies, Lee isn't, I mean, he's tough. He's, agile, he's smart, and he's a good fighter. He can take on a bunch of guys, but he's not invincible. You hit him enough times, he falls down, and one of the things that's always great is, and this is great, the way Jackie Chan does it, is that desperate fighting that, he's trying to rush around, he's trying to fight while going up against, difficult odds. And it was so good to see Lee actually struggle with this. And he actually probably would have lost and might have died. We also get this, really interesting stuff, because they play it like he gets tossed onto this, it's basically like a bed springs, but it's like springs under a bed, but it's like there's no mattress on it. He actually gets knocked into it. He bounces off of it and then bounces back up to continue fighting. Or I don't remember, but he ends up bouncing off it, and I was just thinking yay! Little, weird and goofy stuff. I like that. But most of all, I like the fact that Lee struggled, and it's refreshing. Seeing Lee basically go up and win against everyone, and basically you hit the Lee button, it's like, Lee wins, and it's nice to see that they're letting Lee actually be weak in a fight, because it more humanizes him, because he sometimes comes off a little too robotic in the fights. And I say he comes off I've actually said it, he comes off more Jet Li than he does Jackie Chan, which those guys have two very different, acting styles and two very different ways they fight. But I was really glad, and I really appreciate that. There aren't as many action scenes, but the few ones that are in there are pretty good, especially those two. Now, in terms of characters, I did mention before that the captain actually gets a little expansion. This goes on to she was tracking down a serial killer as a detective, I think, was it 10 years ago? 10, 15, something like that. And she's tracking this killer guy, and basically, everything went to hell and he ended up dying. And they're trying to figure out, this is somehow, the case that they're doing is somehow connected to that, and she offers insight, and we actually get the captain sit down and honestly talk about how she feels about stuff, and how this relates to it, and how this is basically digging up demons from her past, and oh my gosh, that was so good. And it's honestly great to see these side characters get developed, even if it's just a little bit. I'm glad that they're actually doing something with the captain and not having her sit at a desk and just be like, "You messed up, Carter. You messed up." Or something like that. I'm glad that we're actually letting her have, character, and letting her just get involved in the story. This, the plot I didn't mention, but this has no connection to anything. It doesn't have involvement with the triads, with the dragon heads, nothing about Lee's sister. It's all completely separate, and I did like that. And that's part of the thing that makes it feel so unrush hour-y, because this actually, I would say, one of the main characters in this is in fact the captain. I mean, the plot in this actually circles around her. The story revolves around what happened with her, 10 or so, 15 years ago with this serial killer. And I did like that. I really, really enjoyed seeing her. Just, it's also nice to see her, sit down and talk about how she feels about stuff, and to have it not be part of a joke or just delivering exposition. She's actually giving information about her character, and I really did like that. Especially, we get these flashback scenes from that time, and we see her interacting a little bit with, another officer, and it's nice, just little stuff, but it's nice to see that part of her character expanded on. And I also mentioned the forensic expert. She is, this seems to be like a recurring trend in shows. I remember first seeing it when I watched Psych, but I've seen this in other shows as well. The forensic expert is usually someone who's really weird. Now, granted, they work with dead bodies for a living, so, they gotta be at least a little weird, but she was the kooky, weird thing. She keeps her coats on the skeleton rack. She has these, dolls and stuff on her computer desk and stuff, and she's just she definitely falls under a Cloud Cooklander, And she obviously has a real big thing for Lee, and which I said is funny that he's just this massive chick magnet without even realizing it. But I didn't find her character all that interesting, and I do in some ways feel like she's just a character that's been done before. And being introduced so late in the season, we haven't gotten... I mean, this is the first time we've seen her, and she's kind of involved. She delivers some exposition. She has some, talks with the captain personally. She has some talks with Lee and Carter involving the case. So she wasn't, shoved into it, but they did a good job introducing her character, even though... I'm not completely sold on her character yet, but I'm willing to see if they do anything with her in the last few episodes of the season. Overall, when it comes to the characters, that's really the only two standout things with it. Other than that, I mean, when they talk about the serial killer from the past, actually, I found him to be a very interesting character. I actually really liked his character. He was such a fun villain. It's hilarious. He's one of those really quirky villains, and I'm always a big fan of those, those sort of oddball villains. And he was cool too, even though obviously, he's not going to be involved in the rest of the series, considering that this is a very standalone episode. But I liked his character nonetheless. We get a lot of... This episode is actually starting to talk about how Lee and Carter are really, really becoming good friends and really good partners. Even though Carter wants to deny, no, we're manly men. Which is kind of funny. But this is actually in stark contrast to the way the pilot did it. Because it was right after they met. I don't remember. Maybe it was Dee Dee. When they were like... Carter really cares about you. It's they've known each other for a day. They didn't even care about each other that much in Rush Hour 1. Not until the very, very end. And now, waiting 10 episodes into the season, we actually are starting, and after having seen Lee and Carter work together so much, we're starting to see them actually be identified as, best friends. And I really like that. And seeing that grow has actually been one of the greatest things about the show, because we're actually getting the in-betweens from the movies. The stuff that they didn't see, the smaller cases, and seeing these characters build their relationship, especially Lee and Carter, over the course of the show, or in this case, the season, if it doesn't get picked up again. So overall, I actually really, really like this episode. I think it's one of the better episodes of the show. It's not really connected to the plot, so it's not so you don't go into this expecting something that's going to be building on the triads and the dragon heads and Lee's sister. But it's it's much more episodic, with not even a hint of other stuff that's going on. But I still enjoyed it nevertheless for its good plot, and it has some strong action scenes in it that I really enjoyed, along with some really good jokes. So that's it for this. Now, I highly recommend this episode. If you've been watching the show, you need to watch this episode. You don't need to watch it for plot, but I highly recommend it because it's a very enjoyable episode. Even though it does have a bit of a more scary feel sometimes. It's never downright horror, because I hate horror. But it does have it pulls elements of suspense and horror. But yeah, it's a good episode. So, that's it for this review. Check in next week when I post my review for episode 11. And I'll make sure to get that on Sunday or Saturday. I'll watch the episode on Saturday this time. I promise. Anyway, thank you for watching.